Diane's hands trembled as she stared at the pregnancy test, knowing that telling Crown Prince Edward the truth would either save her life or get her killed. But the assassin's footsteps in the hallway meant she was out of time. My beautiful family and friends, welcome back. If you're ready for another unforgettable story, do me a quick favor, hit that like button. Why? Because every like tells YouTube, this story is worth sharing with more people who might really need it today. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I do read every single one, and it makes me feel like we're sitting together in the same room, sharing these moments heart to heart. And don't forget to share this video with someone you love. You never know, the story you share might be the encouragement they've been praying for. This isn't just a channel, it's a family. And when you engage, you're helping us build a safe space where real stories bring real hope. Now, take a deep breath. Get comfortable, and let's dive into today's story. The ornate bathroom door of the Pemberton Manor creaked ominously as Diane Santos shoved the test deep into her borrowed clutch, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. The golden fixtures gleamed mockingly under the amber light, reflecting a face she barely recognized, pale, terrified, and carrying a secret that could topple kingdoms. 3 hours earlier, she had been nothing more than a scholarship student serving champagne to royalty, invisible in her thrift store dress that she'd carefully altered to hide its humble origins. Now, as the muffled sounds of the charity gala echoed through the marble walls, she was a woman holding dynamite in her trembling hands. The footsteps grew closer, deliberate, measured, predatory. Diane pressed her ear to the mahogany door, her breath fogging the polished surface. Through the crack, she glimpsed a shadow moving with lethal precision down the candlelit corridor. The sweet fragrance of white roses from the ballroom arrangements couldn't mask the metallic taste of fear coating her tongue. How did it come to this? 6 months ago, she had been serving coffee at the university cafe, her calloused hands proof of countless double shifts to pay for her literature degree. Her world consisted of worn textbooks, ramen dinners, and dreams too big for her tiny studio apartment. She had never imagined that one chance encounter would lead her here, to this gilded prison where every smile hid a dagger and every whispered conversation could seal her fate. The memory hit her like a physical blow, Prince Edward Boyer's sapphire eyes meeting hers across the crowded cafe, the way time seemed to stop when he smiled, the electricity that crackled between them when their fingers brushed over his order. He had been everything she wasn't, privileged, powerful, destined for greatness. Yet somehow, impossibly, he had chosen her. But love in the royal court was never simple, and Diane had learned too late that some secrets were worth killing for. The footsteps stopped directly outside her door. She clutched the pregnancy test tighter, feeling the plastic edges bite into her palm. Inside her womb, cells were dividing, creating a life that would either bridge two worlds or destroy them both. The child growing within her carried royal blood, blood that certain people would spill oceans to keep from the throne. A soft knock echoed through the bathroom, deceptively gentle. "Miss Santos," a voice purred, smooth as silk and twice as deadly. "We know you're in there." Diane's knees buckled. She recognized that voice from the shadows of court intrigue, from whispered warnings and hastily deleted text messages. Lady Victoria Ashworth, Edward's former fiancée, the woman scorned, the spider at the center of a web Diane was only beginning to understand. The golden doorknob turned slowly, deliberately. Through the frosted glass window above her head, Diane could see the glittering lights of the ballroom where Prince Edward was undoubtedly searching for her, unaware that the woman carrying his child was about to disappear forever. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had come to this gala as his secret, and she would leave as his ghost. But as the door began to creak open, something fierce awakened in Diane's chest. She thought of her mother, who had cleaned these very floors to send her daughter to university. She thought of every person who had ever called her nobody, every sneer from the upper class, every moment she had been made to feel small. And she thought of the tiny heartbeat that would soon echo her own. The pregnancy test slipped from her fingers, clattering to the marble floor with a sound like breaking glass. Lady Victoria stepped into the bathroom, her emerald gown flowing behind her like poisoned water, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around something that glinted silver in the dim light. "Did you really think," Victoria whispered, her red lips curving into a smile that never reached her ice-cold eyes, "that you could carry the future king's bastard and live to tell about it? What do you think Diane should do in this moment? Fight, flee, or try to bargain with Victoria? Drop your thoughts in the comments below." Diane's eyes darted to the window, to the door, to the weapon in Victoria's hand. Every muscle in her body coiled like a spring, ready to fight for the life growing inside her and the love that had brought her to this precipice. But what she saw reflected in Victoria's eyes made her blood turn to ice, because Victoria wasn't alone, and the real nightmare was just beginning. But as Victoria stepped closer, her emerald gown rustling against the marble, something impossible happened. The silver object in her hand wasn't a weapon, it was a phone, and her eyes weren't filled with murderous intent, but with desperate urgency. "You foolish girl," Victoria hissed, grabbing Diane by the shoulders. "Do you have any idea what you've walked into?" Diane's world tilted on its axis. What are you doing?" "Saving your life, apparently." Victoria's perfectly composed mask cracked, revealing something raw and terrified beneath. "They're coming for you, Diane. Right now. And it's not because of the pregnancy." The words hit Diane like a physical blow. "How did you?" "The same way I know everything else in this godforsaken palace." Victoria's grip tightened. "I've been watching you for months, trying to figure out why Edward was so obsessed with a nobody from the university. But you're not nobody, are you?" Through the bathroom window, Diane could see figures moving across the manor's grounds, dark shapes against the manicured gardens, closing in with military precision. Her blood turned to ice. "I don't understand," she whispered, but even as the words left her lips, fragments of suppressed memories began surfacing. Her mother's nervous glances whenever news of the royal family played on their ancient television. The way her grandmother would quickly change the subject whenever Diane asked about her grandfather. The locket her mother had hidden away, the one with the crest Diane had never been allowed to see. Victoria pulled out an ornate mirror from her clutch, angling it so Diane could see her own reflection clearly. "Look at yourself. Really look. The bone structure, the way you hold your chin when you're angry, those eyes." Diane stared at her reflection, and for the first time, she saw what Victoria had seen. The aristocratic cheekbones that no amount of poverty could hide. The regal bearing that emerged when she forgot to make herself small. The distinctive Santos eyes, deep brown with flecks of gold, eyes she had inherited from a mother who had never told her the truth. "Your mother was Lady Isabella Santos," Victoria whispered urgently. "Duke Ricardo Santos's daughter. She was supposed to marry King William 25 years ago, until she fell in love with a commoner and fled the kingdom." The bathroom floor seemed to lurch beneath Diane's feet. Her mother, her quiet, hard-working mother who cleaned offices and served coffee, had been royalty? "That makes you Edward's." Diane couldn't finish the sentence. "Cousin. Third in line to the throne if anyone ever discovers the truth." Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper. "And that's exactly what someone figured out tonight." A sharp crack echoed through the hallway, the sound of expensive heels against marble, moving fast. Victoria grabbed Diane's wrist, her designer nails digging into skin. "Lady Ravencroft is coming," Victoria breathed, and for the first time since Diane had known of her existence, the unflappable socialite looked genuinely afraid. "Edward's aunt. She's the real power behind the throne, and she's been systematically eliminating anyone who threatens the royal succession. But the pregnancy is just the excuse she needed." Victoria yanked Diane toward the window. A royal bastard she could handle with money and threats. But a legitimate heir with a claim to the throne? She'll burn down this entire manor to keep that secret buried. The footsteps in the hallway multiplied, at least 3 sets now, moving with coordinated precision. Diane's mind raced, trying to process the earth-shattering revelation that she wasn't the nobody she had always believed herself to be. She was royalty. Her child wouldn't just be Edward's bastard, it would be the offspring of 2 royal bloodlines. "Why are you helping me?" Diane asked as Victoria struggled with the antique window latch. Victoria's hand stilled for a moment, and when she looked back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Because 20 years ago, Lady Ravencroft had my sister killed for asking too many questions about the Santos family. Elena was just a historian, researching noble bloodlines for her dissertation. But she got too close to the truth, and one night she simply disappeared." The window finally gave way with a rusty screech that sounded deafening in the tense silence. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of roses and the distant sounds of the gala. "There's a car waiting by the east garden," Victoria whispered, pressing something into Diane's hand, a set of keys and what felt like a thick envelope. "Thomas, the old groundskeeper, is loyal to your family. He's been waiting for this day for 25 years. What about Edward?" The words tore from Diane's throat. "I can't leave him. He doesn't know about the baby, about any of this." Victoria's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "Edward is strong, and he has allies you don't know about. But right now, he can't protect you from his own family. The baby you're carrying is the only thing that matters. It's proof of both bloodlines, and it's the key to everything." A door slammed somewhere in the manor, followed by raised voices and the sound of running feet. Lady Ravencroft's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Find her. Now." "Do you think Diane can trust Victoria, or is this all an elaborate trap? What would you do in her position? Let us know in the comments." Victoria boosted Diane up toward the window, her emerald gown tearing on the rough stone sill. "There's something else," she whispered urgently as Diane perched on the ledge. "Your mother left you something, proof of your heritage. Thomas has it. But how do I know you're telling the truth?" Diane asked, even as her body prepared to drop into the garden below. Victoria reached up and pressed something else into Diane's hand, a locket, old and tarnished, with a crest that made Diane's breath catch. She had seen this symbol before, in dreams that felt more like memories, in doodles she had drawn as a child without knowing why. "Because," Victoria said, her voice breaking, "your mother saved my life once, when we were children. I owe her daughter the same." The bathroom door exploded inward, and Lady Ravencroft stepped through like an avenging angel in black silk, her silver hair gleaming in her eyes, holding the cold calculation of a woman who had orchestrated the disappearance of anyone who stood in her way. But she was not alone. Behind her stood a figure that made Diane's heart stop, Prince Edward himself, his sapphire eyes wide with confusion and growing horror as he took in the scene. His formal military dress uniform was disheveled, as if he had been running through the manor. "Edward," Lady Ravencroft purred, Meet your dear cousin Diane Santos. Though I suppose we should call her Lady Diane, shouldn't we?" The look of betrayal that crossed Edward's face was like a dagger to Diane's heart. But it was the fear that followed, fear for her, not of her, that told her everything she needed to know about where his loyalties lay. And that was when the real twist revealed itself. Edward stepped forward, placing himself between his aunt and the window, his hand moving to the sword at his side. "Aunt Victoria," he said quietly, "I've been looking for Diane for a very long time." Edward's words hung in the air like a confession, and Lady Ravencroft's perfectly controlled expression flickered with the first crack of uncertainty Diane had ever seen. "Looking for her?" Lady Ravencroft's voice remained silk-smooth, but her eyes sharpened like razors. "Edward, darling, surely you don't mean—" "I mean," Edward interrupted, never taking his eyes off Diane's face, "that I've known exactly who Diane Santos was from the moment I walked into that coffee shop 6 months ago." The revelation hit Diane like a physical blow. Her grip on the window ledge tightened until her knuckles went white. "What?" Edward's sapphire eyes held a pain so deep it threatened to drown her. "I didn't approach you by accident, Diane. I've been searching for Isabella Santos's daughter for 3 years." Victoria gasped from behind Lady Ravencroft, her hand flying to her throat. "Edward, you didn't." "I did." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled as he reached into his jacket. "After Elena Ashworth's death, I started investigating. I found the records Lady Ravencroft thought she had destroyed. Birth certificates, marriage licenses, DNA tests my father secretly commissioned before he died." Lady Ravencroft's mask finally slipped completely, revealing something feral and desperate beneath. "You foolish boy. Do you have any idea what you've done?" From his jacket, Edward withdrew a thick folder, its edges worn from handling. "I know that my father discovered the truth about the Santos bloodline. I know that he planned to legitimize Diane's claim before his death. And I know that you poisoned him to stop it from happening." The words fell into the room like grenades, exploding everything Diane thought she understood about her world. King William, Edward's father, had been murdered? By his own sister? Lady Ravencroft laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Prove it." "I don't have to." Edward's smile was sharp as a blade. "Because 3 months ago, I submitted DNA evidence to the International Court of Justice. Diane's royal bloodline is already on record." Diane's mind reeled. Every gentle touch, every whispered endearment, every moment of what she had thought was genuine love, had it all been calculated? Had she been nothing more than a political pawn in Edward's game of royal chess? "So the pregnancy," she whispered, her voice breaking, "you knew about that too?" Edward's face went pale. "What pregnancy?" The genuine shock in his voice sent fresh waves of confusion through Diane's already shattered world. He truly didn't know. Which meant, "Oh, this is rich," Lady Ravencroft purred, her confidence returning like armor sliding back into place. "The little royal bastard is carrying an heir. How perfectly catastrophic." Victoria stepped forward, her face deadly serious. "Diane, we need to leave. Now." But Lady Ravencroft raised her hand, and the sound of military boots echoed in the hallway. Armed guards in royal uniforms filed into the bathroom, their faces hidden behind visors, weapons drawn. "I'm afraid no one is leaving," Lady Ravencroft announced. "This ends tonight." Edward's hand flew to his sword, but stopped when he saw the red laser dots dancing across Diane's chest. 3 snipers, positioned outside the window. You see, Lady Ravencroft continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather, the beauty of controlling the royal guard is that history can be rewritten so easily. A tragic accident. A jealous lover's quarrel. Perhaps even a terrorist attack on the Gala. Diane felt the world spinning around her. The man she loved had been using her for political gain. The enemy who was supposed to kill her had tried to save her. And now the woman who had murdered a king was about to eliminate the last threats to her power. But as the guards moved closer, Edward did something that shattered every assumption Diane had made. He dropped to his knees. "Aunt Victoria," he said, his voice carrying the formal weight of royal protocol, "I challenge your authority under the ancient laws of succession. Lady Diane Santos carries the heir to the throne of our bloodline. She is under the protection of the crown, and I claim her as my queen." The words echoed through the marble bathroom like a thunderclap. Edward just claimed Diane as his queen, but is this love, politics, or something else entirely? What do you think his real motives are? Share your theories below. Lady Ravencroft's face went ashen. "You can't possibly." "The law is clear," Edward continued, his voice gaining strength. "A royal heir trumps all other claims. The moment Diane conceived, she became the most important person in this kingdom." Victoria gasped. The Statute of Royal Succession, 1847. If a legitimate heir is conceived by two royal bloodlines, the child becomes first in line to the throne, Edward finished. "Above me. Above everyone." Diane stared down at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Even if everything you've said is true," she whispered, "how do I know this isn't just another manipulation? How do I know you're not using the baby the same way you used me?" Edward looked up at her, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw him completely vulnerable. "Because I love you, Diane. I've loved you since the moment you told that rude customer to shove his entitlement where the sun doesn't shine. I've loved you through every lie I had to tell, every secret I had to keep to protect you from this." He gestured to the guards, to his aunt, to the nightmare they were trapped in. "But I found you for duty," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I stayed for love. And now I would die for both." Lady Ravencroft snarled, her composure finally shattered completely. "How touching. Kill them all." But as the guards raised their weapons, Victoria did something no one expected. She smiled. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," she said conversationally, pulling out her phone. "Because this entire conversation has been broadcast live to every major news network in 12 countries. The blood drained from Lady Ravencroft's face. "That's impossible." Victoria held up the device, its screen showing a red recording light. "Social media is such a wonderful thing, don't you think? #RoyalMurder is already trending." The sound of helicopters filled the air outside, news crews, arriving faster than anyone could have anticipated. Flashing lights painted the bathroom walls in strobing colors as cameras captured every angle of the mansion. Lady Ravencroft stared at Victoria with something approaching respect. "You clever little spider. You planned this." "I've been planning this for 20 years, Victoria replied coldly. "Ever since you had my sister murdered for discovering the truth about the Santos family. Every move, every alliance, every carefully placed piece on the board." Edward rose to his feet slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're not Elena's sister," he said quietly. "You are Elena." Victoria's smile was razor-sharp and utterly satisfied. Surprise. The bathroom fell into a silence so complete that Diane could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. Elena Victoria, whoever she was, stood like a statue carved from vengeance, her phone still broadcasting their nightmare to the world. Lady Ravencroft's eyes darted between the guards, the window, and the woman who had supposedly been dead for 20 years. "Elena Ashworth," she breathed. "I watched them bury you." "You watched them bury a car accident victim who happened to have my ID," Elena replied with cold satisfaction. "Amazing what money and desperation can accomplish. Though I must say, plastic surgery has come a long way since 1998. Diane gripped the window ledge tighter, her knuckles white against the dark stone. The revelations were coming too fast, each one reshaping her understanding of reality like a kaleidoscope spinning out of control. "How long have you been planning this?" "Every day for 20 years, Elena's voice carried the weight of decades spent in hiding. "Every charity gala I attended as Victoria Ashworth. Every smile I gave to the woman who murdered my research partner and tried to kill me. Every moment I spent building the perfect trap." Edward stepped closer to the window, his eyes never leaving Diane's face. "Diane, please. You have to believe me. I never wanted it to happen like this." "Which part?" Diane's voice cracked with emotion. "The part where you lied about everything, or the part where you got me pregnant for political gain?" "The pregnancy wasn't planned." Edward's composure finally shattered. "God, Diane, do you think I'm that calculating? I fell in love with you. The real you. The woman who defended homeless veterans to entitled college students. The woman who spent her last $20 on coffee for the night security guard. The woman who—" "Stop." Diane's whisper cut through his words like a blade. "Just stop." Lady Ravencroft watched their exchange with growing confidence. "How touching. But I'm afraid your little broadcast means nothing, Elena. The Royal Guard answers to me." She turned to the armed men flanking the doorway. "Captain Morrison, eliminate all witnesses." The lead guard stepped forward, removing his helmet to reveal a weathered face marked by decades of service. But instead of raising his weapon, he did something that made Lady Ravencroft stumble backward. He dropped to one knee. "Your Royal Highness," he said, addressing Diane with ceremonial formality that seemed to come from muscle memory. "The Royal Guard has been waiting for your return." Lady Ravencroft's face went white. "What?" Captain Morrison rose slowly, his eyes holding a loyalty that ran deeper than politics or power. 25 years ago, King William entrusted the Guard with protecting the Santos bloodline. We've been watching over Lady Diane her entire life. The twist hit Diane like a physical blow. "Watching over me?" "The scholarship that paid for your education," the captain continued. "The jobs that always seemed to appear when your mother needed them most. The accidents that never quite happened when you walked alone at night." He gestured to his men. "We've been your shadows since birth, my lady." Diane's legs gave out. If Edward hadn't lunged forward to catch her, she would have tumbled from the window ledge. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back into the bathroom, and for a moment, despite everything, she felt safe. "The coffee shop," she whispered, pieces clicking into place. "You knew Edward would find me there." Captain Morrison nodded gravely. "Prince Edward had been searching for you for 3 years. We simply made sure he looked in the right place." Lady Ravencroft backed against the marble wall, her perfect composure crumbling like ancient parchment. "This is impossible. I control the Guard. I give the orders." You give orders to ceremonial guards, the captain corrected. Palace decoration. The Real Royal Guard has always served the crown, not the pretender wearing it. Edward helped Diane steady herself, his hands gentle despite the chaos surrounding them. Diane, I know you have no reason to trust me, but... Don't. She pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself protectively. I need to think. I need to understand what's real. Elena checked her phone, her expression growing tense. The news crews are surrounding the building, but they're not the only ones coming. Lady Ravencroft's mercenaries will arrive within the hour. Mercenaries. Edward spun toward his aunt, his hand moving instinctively to his sword. You hired foreign soldiers against your own family? Lady Ravencroft's laugh was brittle as winter ice. Family? You mean the bastard offspring of a runaway princess and her commoner lover? The prince who would throw away centuries of pure bloodline for a nobody from the university district. I am not a nobody, Diane said quietly, and something in her voice made everyone in the room freeze. For the first time since this nightmare began, she straightened to her full height, and the aristocratic bearing that poverty had never quite managed to suppress blazed like a flame. I am Lady Diane Santos, daughter of Isabella, granddaughter of Duke Ricardo, third in line to the throne by right of birth. Her voice grew stronger with each word. And the child I carry will be first. Diane is finally claiming her royal identity. But do you think she's ready to handle the responsibility and danger that comes with it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Edward stared at her with something approaching awe. There she is, he breathed. The queen I saw hiding behind all that fear. But Lady Ravencroft wasn't finished. As Elena continued monitoring news feeds and the captain coordinated with his men, the deposed power behind the throne reached into her evening bag with movements too casual to be innocent. You know, she said conversationally, there's one tiny detail everyone seems to have forgotten. Elena looked up sharply. What detail? Lady Ravencroft smiled and pulled out a small silver device that looked like an elegant perfume atomizer. The detail about how quickly airborne toxins can clear a room. Captain Morrison lunged forward, but Lady Ravencroft was already pressing the trigger. A fine mist filled the air, carrying with it the sweet scent of almonds and something else, something chemical and wrong. Cyanide compound, Lady Ravencroft announced pleasantly as everyone began to cough. Colorless, odorless when properly masked, and absolutely fatal in confined spaces. Edward grabbed Diane, pulling her toward the window, but the captain caught his arm. The snipers, Your Highness. They're still positioned outside. Elena stumbled, her phone clattering to the marble floor. The antidote, she gasped. There has to be an antidote. Oh, there is, Lady Ravencroft confirmed, pulling a small silver injector from her bag. But I only brought one. The room spun around Diane as the poison began to take effect. Her throat burned, her vision blurred, and she could feel her heartbeat becoming erratic. But worse than her own symptoms was watching Edward struggle to breathe, watching Elena collapse against the wall, watching the loyal guards who had protected her entire life begin to weaken. Choose, Lady Ravencroft commanded, holding up the antidote. Save yourself and the heir, or watch everyone you love die. But choose quickly. You have perhaps 3 minutes before the decision is made for you. Through her growing weakness, Diane felt something fierce and primal awaken in her chest. The protective instincts of a mother, the rage of a woman who had been manipulated and betrayed, and something else, something royal and ancient and utterly uncompromising. I choose, she whispered, and lunged not for the antidote, but for Lady Ravencroft herself. But as they struggled, the real twist revealed itself. The silver atomizer clattered across the floor, and Diane saw the truth stamped on its base in tiny letters. Training device, water vapor only. Lady Ravencroft had been bluffing. The poison was harmless, but the fear and chaos it had created were not. In the confusion, she had been maneuvering everyone exactly where she wanted them, away from the exits, separated from their allies, and distracted from the real threat approaching through the manor's gardens. Through the window, Diane glimpsed the mercenaries Elena had warned about, moving through the darkness like shadows with guns. The fake poison revelation should have brought relief, but as Diane stared at the harmless training device, a more terrifying truth began to crystallize. The elaborate deception, the perfect timing, the way every piece had fallen into place, it was all too orchestrated, too precise. "Captain Morrison," she said slowly, her voice cutting through the chaos, "how did you know exactly when to arrive? How did you know we would be in this specific bathroom?" The weathered soldier's expression flickered, just for a moment, but it was enough. Edward caught it too. His hand moved to his sword as understanding dawned in his sapphire eyes. "You weren't protecting her. You were hurting her." Lady Ravencroft laughed, but there was no triumph in the sound, only bitter recognition. "Oh, Elena. You clever, stupid girl. You thought you were the puppet master, but you never saw the strings attached to your own limbs." Elena struggled to her feet, her face pale with growing horror. "What are you talking about?" Captain Morrison sighed heavily, the weight of decades seeming to settle on his shoulders. "I'm sorry, Your Highness," he said to Diane, "but my orders have always come from a higher authority than the Crown." The bathroom door, which had been closed, swung open with theatrical precision, and Isabella Santos walked in. Not the tired, worn woman who had cleaned offices to pay for her daughter's education. Not the humble mother who had hidden her past behind calloused hands and worried smiles. This Isabella moved with the fluid grace of someone born to power, dressed in an elegant black gown that probably cost more than Diane's entire education. Her dark hair swept into a regal chignon that framed features Diane recognized from her own mirror. "Hello, my darling daughter," Isabella said, her voice carrying an accent Diane had never heard before, aristocratic, cultured, dangerous. "I do hope you'll forgive the dramatics, but some lessons can only be learned through experience." Diane felt the world tilt on its axis. "Mother." "Lady Isabella Santos," Edward breathed, and there was something in his voice that made Diane's blood freeze. "You're supposed to be dead." Isabella's smile was sharp as a blade. "Death is such a limiting concept for someone with the right resources. I've been very much alive, and very much in control for the past 25 years. Elena backed against the wall, her phone forgotten on the floor. "This is impossible. The records, the investigations, were all carefully crafted to lead you exactly where I needed you to go." Isabella's gaze swept the room like a queen surveying her domain. "Did you really think a historian-turned-socialite could orchestrate something this complex without help?" The mercenaries Diane had seen through the window filed into the bathroom, but they weren't threatening. They moved with the disciplined precision of a royal guard, taking positions that protected rather than imprisoned. "I don't understand," Diane whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "You cleaned office buildings. You worked double shifts. We lived in that tiny apartment." "We lived exactly as I needed us to live," Isabella interrupted gently. "Close enough to the university that Prince Edward would eventually find you. Poor enough that your natural compassion would shine through. hidden enough that Lady Ravencroft's surveillance would find only what I wanted her to find. Edward's face had gone ashen. The coffee shop. You arranged that meeting. I arranged everything. Isabella moved to the window, gazing out at the news crews and flashing lights. Your 3-year search for the Santos heir. Elena's 20-year quest for revenge. Victoria Ashworth's convenient disappearance and reappearance. Even your father's death, dear Edward. Lady Ravencroft staggered as if she'd been physically struck. You didn't poison William. I did. Isabella's laugh was like music, beautiful and cold. Oh, Victoria. You poisoned a man who was already dying of cancer. All you did was speed up a timeline I had already set in motion. Isabella has been controlling everything from the shadows. But is she the hero or the true villain of this story? What do you think her endgame really is? Share your theories below. The revelations crashed over Diane like waves, each one threatening to pull her under. The pregnancy, she said, her voice barely audible. Did you plan that too? Isabella's expression softened with what might have been genuine maternal love. No, darling. That beautiful surprise was entirely your own. Though I must admit, it does accelerate our timeline considerably. Edward stepped protectively closer to Diane, his confusion evident. Timeline for what? For revolution, Isabella said simply. For the complete overthrow of a corrupt monarchy that has ruled through fear and murder for centuries. For placing my daughter, the rightful queen, on the throne she was born to inherit. Elena found her voice, though it shook with betrayal. My sister really is dead, isn't she? You used her death to motivate me, to make me the perfect weapon against Lady Ravencroft. Elena died because she discovered the truth too early, Isabella confirmed with clinical detachment. But her death served a purpose. It created the perfect vengeful socialite to infiltrate court society and gather the evidence I needed. Lady Ravencroft was staring at Isabella with something approaching admiration. You magnificent monster. You played us all. Not all. Isabella's gaze moved to Edward, and for the first time, there was uncertainty in her eyes. I expected Edward to use Diane for political gain and discard her when convenient. I never anticipated genuine love entering the equation. Edward straightened, his military bearing asserting itself. Then you underestimated both your daughter and me. Perhaps. Isabella pulled out an ornate document from her evening bag, old parchment sealed with royal wax. But it doesn't matter now. This is King William's final decree, written before his death and witnessed by the Archbishop of Canterbury. It legitimizes Diane's claim and names her rightful heir to the throne. Diane stared at the document that would change everything. And if I refuse? Then Lady Ravencroft's mercenaries, the real ones, not my guards, will arrive within the hour and eliminate everyone in this room, Isabella said matter-of-factly. The news broadcast Elena arranged will be dismissed as elaborate theater. The evidence will disappear. And another generation will grow up under the rule of murderers and tyrants. Through the window, Diane could see more vehicles arriving, military trucks, their occupants moving with lethal precision toward the manor. Those are Lady Ravencroft's real allies, Isabella continued. Foreign soldiers with no loyalty to the crown. They have orders to kill everyone and stage a terrorist attack. The only way to stop them is to claim the throne and command the loyalty of the actual royal army. Edward's hand found Diane's, his fingers intertwining with hers. Whatever you decide, he said quietly, I'm with you. But as Diane reached for the document that would make her queen, Isabella revealed the final devastating twist. "There's one more thing you should know, darling. Edward isn't just the prince you fell in love with." Isabella's smile was razor-sharp. "He's also your half-brother." The world stopped. Everything, the sound of helicopters, the distant gunfire, Elena's gasp of horror, faded into a roaring silence as Diane stared at the man whose child she carried. "King William had an affair with my sister before he married me," Isabella continued relentlessly. "Edward Boyer isn't his legitimate son. He's my nephew, which makes him your cousin, and under royal law, your marriage would be not just possible, but advantageous for bloodline purity." Edward's face had gone white as parchment. That's impossible. "DNA doesn't lie, dear boy. Though I must say, the resemblance to your real father is quite striking once you know what to look for." Lady Ravenscroft began to laugh, a sound like breaking glass that echoed off the marble walls. "Oh, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect." The great Isabella Santos, playing puppet master for 25 years, only to create the most delicious scandal in royal history. As the sound of approaching gunfire grew closer, Diane realized that every choice had been an illusion. Every path had led to this moment, where she had to choose between claiming a throne built on lies and watching everyone she cared about die. And the man she loved, the father of her child, might not be who she thought he was at all. The revelation hung in the air like poison, more toxic than any weapon Lady Ravenscroft could have deployed. Diane stared at Edward, searching his face for the shock and horror that should mirror her own. But what she found instead was something far worse. Guilt. "You knew," she whispered, the words falling from her lips like stones into still water. "Oh God, Edward. You knew." Edward's face crumpled, and in that moment, he looked less like a prince and more like a man drowning in his own deceptions. "Diane, I can explain." "When?" Her voice was barely audible, but it cut through the chaos like a scream. "When did you find out?" The gunfire outside was getting closer now, the sound of Lady Ravenscroft's mercenaries moving through the manor's lower floors. But all Diane could hear was the thundering of her own heartbeat as she waited for Edward to destroy what remained of her world. "3 weeks ago," he admitted, his voice breaking. "The DNA results came back 3 weeks ago." The timeline hit her like a physical blow. 3 weeks ago, they had made love in her tiny apartment, whispering promises about their future. 3 weeks ago, she had conceived the child now growing inside her. 3 weeks ago, while she was falling deeper in love with him, he had known they were family. 3 weeks, she repeated numbly. "The night I told you I loved you." "Diane, please." "The night we conceived this child." Her hand moved protectively to her stomach, and she saw Edward flinch as if she'd struck him. "You knew we were cousins, and you still—" "It's not like that." Edward stepped toward her, but she backed away as if he carried plague. "The feelings were real. Everything between us was real. I was trying to figure out how to tell you, how to make you understand." "Understand what?" "That you're as manipulative as everyone else in this godforsaken family." Diane's voice rose to a pitch that made everyone in the room freeze. "That you used my body to create an heir while knowing exactly what the bloodline implications would be." Isabella watched the exchange with clinical interest, as if observing a particularly fascinating experiment. "Darling, in royal families, cousin marriages are quite common. The House of Habsburg." "I don't care about the House of Habsburg." Diane's composure finally shattered completely. I care that the man I love has been lying to me for 3 weeks about something that changes everything." Lady Ravencroft had stopped laughing, her attention now focused on the approaching sounds of combat. "This touching family reunion will have to wait. My mercenaries have reached the 2nd floor." As if summoned by her words, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the marble bathroom in hellish red shadows. Through the window, Diane could see muzzle flashes in the darkness, Isabella's guards engaging with the approaching attackers. "We need to move," Captain Morrison said urgently. "The safe room is 3 floors down, but we'll have to fight our way there." "No." Diane's voice was steady now, cold as winter steel. "I'm done running." She grabbed the royal decree from Isabella's hands, the ancient parchment crackling under her fingers. For a moment, everyone in the room held their breath. Then she tore it in half. "Diane." Edward lunged forward, but she danced away from him, the pieces of the document fluttering to the marble floor like dead leaves. "I don't want your throne," she said to Isabella, her voice carrying a finality that made even the approaching gunfire seem quiet. "I don't want your crown, your bloodline, or your 25-year plan. I want nothing to do with any of you." Diane just destroyed the only thing that could save them all. Do you think she's being brave or foolish? What would you have done in her position? Let us know your thoughts. Isabella's mask of control slipped for the first time, revealing something desperate beneath. "You don't understand the consequences." "I understand perfectly." Diane moved toward the window, her movements fluid and determined. "Without that decree, I'm nobody again. Just a poor girl carrying a royal bastard. Lady Ravencroft's mercenaries have no reason to kill me." Elena found her voice from where she crouched against the wall. "Diane, you can't possibly think." "I think," Diane interrupted, "that I'd rather die as myself than live as someone else's puppet." Edward stepped between her and the window, his face desperate. "The baby, Diane. Think about the baby." "I am thinking about the baby." Her voice softened for just a moment, and Edward saw a flash of the woman he'd fallen in love with. "I'm thinking about raising a child who knows the truth from the beginning, who never has to wonder if the people who claim to love them are using them for something else." The sound of automatic weapons fire erupted from the hallway outside. The mercenaries had reached their floor. Isabella pulled a pistol from her evening bag, her maternal facade cracking to reveal something harder underneath. "You're forcing my hand, Diane. I've spent 25 years building this moment. I won't let you throw it away for the sake of wounded feelings." "Then shoot me," Diane said simply, "because I'm not changing my mind." But as Isabella raised the weapon, the bathroom door exploded inward, and figures in tactical gear poured through the opening. Not Lady Ravencroft's mercenaries. These moved with different precision, different loyalty. "Royal Protection Service," the lead figure announced, pulling off his helmet to reveal a face Diane recognized from news broadcasts. "Stand down immediately." Lady Ravencroft's expression shifted from confident to confused to terrified in the span of seconds. "That's impossible. You were supposed to be neutralized." The RPS commander smiled grimly. "Hard to neutralize a service that's been expecting this attack for 6 months, my lady." Through the shattered doorway, Diane could see more royal guards moving through the hallway, engaging with the mercenaries in coordinated strikes. The tide of battle was turning, but not in the direction anyone had expected. 6 months. Edward stepped forward, his confusion evident. "How did you know?" The commander's gaze moved to Isabella, and something in his expression made the room's temperature drop several degrees. Because Lady Isabella Santos has been feeding us intelligence about Lady Ravencroft's plans for half a year. Every meeting, every mercenary contact, every weapon purchase. The final twist of the darkest hour revealed itself like a blade sliding between ribs. Isabella lowered her pistol, her expression shifting to something almost apologetic. "I'm sorry, Victoria, but your usefulness expired the moment you hired foreign soldiers against the crown." Lady Ravencroft stared at her in horrified understanding. "You were never planning a revolution. You were planning a restoration." "Exactly." Isabella's voice carried the satisfaction of a chess master revealing checkmate. Every piece on the board, positioned precisely where it needed to be. Edward's love for Diane ensuring his loyalty. Elena's desire for revenge ensuring her cooperation. Your desperation ensuring you'd reveal all your allies and resources. Elena gasped from her position against the wall. "The mercenaries are walking into a trap that's been 6 months in the making," Isabella confirmed. "By morning, Lady Ravencroft's entire network will be eliminated, and the crown will be stronger than it's been in decades." Diane felt the last of her strength leave her. Even her mother's love had been calculated, measured, deployed as a weapon. Even her pregnancy had been turned into a tool for political gain. "So none of it was real," she whispered, sinking to her knees on the cold marble. "None of it was ever real." Edward knelt beside her, his hand reaching for hers, but she pulled away. The man she loved was her cousin. The mother she trusted was a master manipulator. The child she carried was a pawn before it was even born. Outside, the battle was ending, the mercenaries eliminated or captured. Inside, Diane Santos, nobody from the university district, sat surrounded by the wreckage of every truth she had ever believed. And as Isabella began explaining the next phase of her master plan, Diane closed her eyes and made a decision that would change everything. She was done being anyone's pawn, even if it meant losing everything. Diane knelt on the cold marble floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her shattered world, when something extraordinary happened. In the depths of her despair, she felt it, a tiny flutter, barely perceptible, like butterfly wings against her ribs. The baby. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, and in that moment of connection with the life growing inside her, something fierce and protective blazed to life. This child, whatever the circumstances of its conception, was innocent. This child deserved better than to be born into a web of lies and manipulation. "No," she said quietly, and the word cut through Isabella's monologue about restoration and political necessity like a blade through silk. "Excuse me." Isabella paused mid-sentence, her perfectly controlled expression flickering with annoyance. Diane rose to her feet slowly, and everyone in the room fell silent. The emergency lighting cast her shadow large against the marble wall, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she looked like what she was, royalty. "I said no." Her voice was steady now, carrying an authority that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than training or breeding. "No more lies. No more manipulation. No more treating people like chess pieces in your grand game." She turned to face the RPS commander, her chin lifted in challenge. "You said you've been tracking Lady Ravencroft's plans for 6 months. What else have you been tracking?" The commander's expression grew uncomfortable. "I'm not sure what you mean, Your Highness." "Don't call me that," Diane snapped, and the man actually took a step back. "I'm not Your Highness. I'm not anyone's highness. I'm a woman who deserves the truth, and I want it now." Edward struggled to his feet, reaching for her. "Diane, please." "You stay away from me," she said without looking at him. "I'll deal with you later." She advanced on the commander, and something in her bearing made him straighten involuntarily. "The DNA results that showed Edward was my cousin. Who ordered those tests?" "Your Highness, I really can't." "Answer the question." The command exploded from her with such force that even Isabella took a step back. The commander glanced nervously between Isabella and Lady Ravenscroft. The tests were ordered by external intelligence services. MI6, specifically. A cold dread began spreading through Diane's chest. Why would MI6 care about royal bloodlines? "Because," came a new voice from the doorway, "sometimes the most dangerous threats to national security come from within the royal family itself." Everyone turned as a figure stepped through the shattered entrance. A woman in her 50s, dressed in a simple black suit, carrying herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to wielding invisible power. "Director Sarah Mitchell," Isabella breathed, and for the first time since Diane had known her, her mother looked genuinely afraid. "What are you doing here?" "Cleaning up a mess that's been 25 years in the making," Director Mitchell replied calmly. She nodded to Diane with something approaching respect. "Lady Diane. Or should I say, Miss Santos? The truth is, I'm not entirely sure which is accurate anymore." A government intelligence director just appeared. "Do you think she's here to help, or is she another player in this deadly game? What's your prediction about the DNA results? Share below." Edward stepped forward, his confusion evident. "Director Mitchell, with respect, this is a royal family matter." "Is it?" The director's smile was razor-sharp. "Because from where I sit, this looks like a foreign intelligence operation using fabricated DNA results to destabilize the monarchy." The words hit the room like a bomb. Lady Ravenscroft went pale. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Director Mitchell pulled out a tablet, swiping through official documents. "Lady Ravenscroft, you've been receiving payments from Russian intelligence services for the past 18 months. Lady Isabella, your supposed death and resurrection was funded by Chinese military intelligence. And the DNA laboratory that processed those family relationship tests? It's been feeding false results to destabilize European monarchies for the past 5 years." Diane felt the world shift beneath her feet, but this time, it was shifting back towards something that made sense. The DNA results were fake? "Completely fabricated," Director Mitchell confirmed. "Edward Boyer is King William's legitimate son, no relation to the Santos family beyond political alliance. The tests were designed to create exactly this kind of chaos, turn family members against each other, undermine legitimate succession, create doubt about royal bloodlines." Edward staggered as if he'd been physically struck. "You mean we're not cousins?" "No." Director Mitchell's expression softened slightly. "The child Lady Diane carries is the legitimate heir of 2 entirely separate royal bloodlines. Quite possibly the most important royal birth in a century, which is exactly why so many foreign powers want to prevent it." Isabella's mask of maternal concern finally slipped completely, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "You meddling fool. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've prevented a foreign coup disguised as a family drama," Director Mitchell replied calmly. "Though I admit, sorting through all the double and triple agents has been quite the puzzle." Elena found her voice from her position against the wall. "If the DNA results were fake, then everything Everything was a lie designed to turn you against each other. Director Mitchell's gaze swept the room. Lady Ravencroft was being fed false intelligence about Isabella's plans. Isabella was being fed false intelligence about Ravencroft's resources. Elena, your sister really did die in that car accident, but it was caused by agents trying to recruit you, not eliminate you. The revelations came like hammer blows, each one reshaping Diane's understanding of the past 6 months. But one question remained, burning in her chest like acid. What about my mother? She turned to face Isabella, her voice deadly quiet. Are you even really Isabella Santos? The woman who had raised her smiled, and it was a stranger's smile, cold, professional, utterly without the warmth Diane remembered from childhood. Isabella Santos died in childbirth 26 years ago, she said matter-of-factly. I'm Agent Maria Volkov, Russian FSB. I've been playing your mother since you were 2 years old. The final twist hit Diane like a physical blow. The woman who had raised her, who had worked double shifts to pay for her education, who had held her through nightmares and celebrated her successes, was a foreign spy. Edward caught her as her legs gave out, his arms wrapping around her protectively. It's over, he whispered into her hair. Whatever else happens, it's over. But Director Mitchell's expression suggested it was far from over. Actually, she said grimly, the real Isabella Santos is very much alive. She's been in protective custody for 26 years, waiting for the moment when it was safe to reclaim her daughter. She gestured toward the doorway, where another figure stood silhouetted against the emergency lighting. A woman with Diane's eyes, Diane's bone structure, and Diane's fierce expression stepped into the room. Hello, my darling girl, she said, and her voice carried all the warmth and love that Maria Volkov's had lacked. I've been waiting so long to meet you. This was Diane's real mother. And everything, absolutely everything, was about to change again. The real Isabella Santos stepped into the emergency-lit bathroom like a queen reclaiming her kingdom. She moved with grace that made Maria Volkov's practiced elegance look like a cheap imitation, and when her eyes met Diane's, the connection was immediate and undeniable. My daughter, Isabella whispered, reaching out with trembling hands. My beautiful, brave daughter. But as Diane moved toward her real mother, Maria Volkov, the Russian spy who had raised her, did something unexpected. She smiled. Not the cold, professional smile she'd worn moments before. This was warm, genuine, and filled with something that looked suspiciously like pride. Go to her, little star, Maria said softly, using the pet name she'd called Diane since childhood. You've earned this moment. Director Mitchell stepped forward, her weapon trained on Maria. Agent Volkov, you're under arrest for... For what? Maria's laugh was bitter. For loving a child who wasn't mine? For working 3 jobs to put her through university? For teaching her to be strong and compassionate and everything a queen should be? Edward helped steady Diane as she stared between the 2 women who claimed to be her mother. I don't understand. If you're a Russian spy, why did you? Because 26 years ago, I was assigned to eliminate Isabella Santos and replace her permanently, Maria said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of deception. But when I held you in my arms for the first time, when you looked at me with those trusting eyes... She shrugged, a gesture so familiar it made Diane's chest ache. I became your mother instead of your assassin. The real Isabella stepped closer, tears streaming down her face. Maria sent me secret updates about you every month for 26 years. Photos, school reports, video of your first steps. She kept me alive through every moment I missed. Director Mitchell's weapon wavered. That's impossible. Our intelligence suggested. Your intelligence was fed information by two women working together to protect a child, the real Isabella interrupted. Maria Volkov went rogue 26 years ago. She's been a double agent ever since, feeding false information to Moscow while helping MI6 track other Russian operations in the UK. The revelation hit Diane like a physical blow, but this time it was the good kind, the kind that put broken pieces back together instead of shattering them further. So you really did love me? Maria's composure finally cracked. From the moment you took your first breath, little star. You were supposed to be a mission. Instead, you became my heart. But as the two mother figures moved closer to Diane, Edward suddenly tensed. His military training had picked up something the others had missed, the sound of additional footsteps in the hallway, moving with stealth rather than the heavy boots of the RPS teams. "Director Mitchell," he said quietly, "how many of your people are in the building?" 12, she replied immediately. "Why?" "Because I count at least 20 sets of footsteps heading our way." Lady Ravencroft, who had been unusually quiet during the revelations, suddenly smiled. "Oh, Edward. You always were too clever for your own good." The final twist of the climax revealed itself as armed figures in black tactical gear poured through the bathroom's shattered doorway. Not Russian agents, not Chinese operatives, not even Lady Ravencroft's mercenaries. They moved with the precision of British special forces, but their weapons were trained on Director Mitchell, not the supposed foreign agents. "Stand down, Director," the lead operative commanded. "By order of the Prime Minister." Director Mitchell's face went pale. "That's impossible. The PM authorized this operation personally." "The PM authorized Operation Clean Slate," the operative corrected. "The complete elimination of foreign intelligence assets operating within the royal family. All foreign intelligence assets." The blood drained from Director Mitchell's face as understanding dawned. "Including the assets working for MI6. The government just turned on their own intelligence director. Do you think this is about protecting the monarchy or controlling it? What's really going on here? Share your theories." Maria stepped protectively in front of Diane, her maternal instincts overriding her spy training. "Stay behind me, little star." But Diane moved around her, standing tall despite the weapons trained on them. "No. I'm done hiding behind other people's choices." She faced the lead operative directly, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to surprise even her. "I am Lady Diane Santos, carrying the heir to the throne. If you're here to eliminate foreign threats to the crown, then you're here to protect me." The operative's stance shifted slightly, a moment of uncertainty that Edward immediately recognized and exploited. "She's right," he said, moving to stand beside Diane. "Under the Protection of Royal Persons Act, any threat to Lady Diane constitutes treason against the crown. Unless," Lady Ravencroft said pleasantly, "the crown itself has determined that Lady Diane poses the greater threat." She pulled out a document bearing the royal seal, not the decree Isabella had brought, but something else entirely. A warrant signed by the Queen herself. Lady Diane Santos is to be eliminated as a foreign intelligence asset posing a direct threat to national security. The operative examined the document, then nodded grimly. Authorization confirmed. But as weapons were raised and final positions taken, the Real Isabella did something that changed everything. She laughed. It was the laugh of someone who had been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, someone who had seen this moment coming and prepared for it. "Victoria," she said to Lady Ravenscroft, "you really should have done more research before forging that warrant." She reached into her gown and pulled out her own document, this one bearing not just the Queen's seal, but her signature as well. Official recognition of Lady Diane Santos as a person of royal blood, signed and sealed 3 hours ago. Isabella's smile was triumphant. Her Majesty was quite interested to learn about the foreign intelligence operations targeting her family, and quite determined to ensure her great-grandchild's safety. The operative checked the authentication codes on both documents, his expression growing confused. "Director, I'm reading conflicting orders here." But before Director Mitchell could respond, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air outside. Through the shattered window, everyone could see the distinctive aircraft of the royal family approaching the manor. "That would be Her Majesty," Isabella said calmly. She decided this situation required her personal attention. Lady Ravenscroft's composure finally cracked completely. "This is impossible. The Queen never involves herself in intelligence matters." "She does when someone threatens her succession," came a familiar voice from the doorway. Everyone in the room, armed operatives, foreign agents, royalty, and commoners alike, immediately dropped to one knee as Queen Elizabeth herself entered the bathroom, flanked by her personal guard. At 97 years old, she still moved with the dignity and authority of someone born to rule. Her sharp eyes took in the scene with a single glance, cataloging allies and enemies with decades of experience. "Well," she said dryly, "this is quite the family gathering." Her gaze settled on Diane, who remained kneeling with her head bowed, and something in the Queen's expression softened. "Rise, child," she commanded gently. "Let me see the face of my great-grandchild's mother." Diane rose slowly, meeting the Queen's eyes with a mixture of terror and defiance that seemed to amuse the monarch. "You have your grandmother's spirit," the Queen observed. "Isabella always did know how to cause a proper scandal." She turned to the operative, still holding the conflicting warrants. "Colonel Matthews, I believe there's been some confusion about my orders." "Yes, Your Majesty. We have conflicting authorizations regarding Lady Diane's status." "Indeed." The Queen's smile was razor-sharp. "The confusion stems from the fact that one of those documents is a forgery designed to eliminate the mother of my heir. Can you guess which one?" Lady Ravenscroft began backing toward the window, but the Queen's guards were already moving to intercept her. 25 years, the Queen continued conversationally, I've been aware of the foreign intelligence operations targeting my family. Did you really think I would allow them to succeed at the moment of my greatest triumph?" She gestured to Diane's still flat stomach. "The child this young woman carries will unite two of the oldest royal bloodlines in Europe. It will strengthen the monarchy for generations. And anyone who threatens that child threatens me personally." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place for Diane. This hadn't been chaos. It had been a carefully orchestrated plan to flush out every threat to the royal succession in a single night. And she had been the bait that brought them all together. Diane stood on the balcony of Kensington Palace, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her growing belly, watching Edward teach Maria Volkov how to tend the royal rose garden. The sight of the former Russian spy arguing with the prince about proper pruning techniques while wearing muddy gardening gloves was so absurd it made her laugh. "Something amusing, darling?" Isabella approached with 2 cups of tea, moving with the regal grace she'd been denied for 26 years but had somehow never lost. "Just thinking about how impossible this all would have seemed a year ago," Diane replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "A Russian spy, a British prince, and a long-lost mother having a garden party at the palace. Isabella smiled, settling into the chair beside her daughter. The Queen does have a talent for turning chaos into harmony. Through the French doors, they could hear the Queen herself holding court in the drawing room, regaling Director Mitchell and Colonel Matthews with stories from her 7 decades on the throne. Lady Ravenscroft was notably absent. She was currently enjoying the hospitality of a very secure government facility. "Do you think she planned all of this?" Diane asked, unconsciously echoing a question that had haunted her for months. Isabella's expression grew thoughtful. "Your great-grandmother is many things, but omniscient isn't one of them. I think she simply recognized an opportunity and made the most of it." Edward jogged up from the garden, dirt on his hands and joy on his face. The past 6 months had transformed him from a burdened prince carrying the weight of duty into a man who had found his purpose in love. He pressed a gentle kiss to Diane's temple before settling on the ground beside her chair. "The roses will be beautiful this summer," he said contentedly. "Maria insists on using some Russian technique that sounds completely mad but apparently works miracles." "She taught me that method when I was 8, Diane said softly. "I never knew it came from Russia." The quiet moment was interrupted by the arrival of Elena, the real Elena Ashworth, whose death had been greatly exaggerated by intelligence services who needed a convenient cover story. She'd spent the past 20 years in witness protection, but the Queen had decided it was time for all hidden truths to come to light. "Your Majesty requests your presence in the drawing room," Elena announced with a grin. "Apparently, she has an announcement to make." They made their way inside, joining the assembled group in the elegant room that had hosted centuries of royal gatherings. The Queen stood by the fireplace, her posture as straight and commanding as ever despite her age. "I've asked you all here," she began, "because you've become something of an extended family through these remarkable circumstances. And families should be together for important moments." She gestured to Diane with obvious affection. "My dear, would you join me?" Diane rose carefully, Edward's steadying hand on her elbow, and approached the Queen with the mixture of love and awe that had developed over the past months. "6 months ago," the Queen continued, "we uncovered a web of foreign interference designed to destabilize the monarchy. Today, I'm pleased to announce that every threat has been neutralized, every enemy agent has been captured or turned, and the crown is stronger than it has been in decades." Polite applause filled the room, but the Queen held up a hand for silence. "But that's not why I called you here." Her eyes sparkled with something that might have been mischief. "I called you here because I have a confession to make." The Queen is about to make a confession that will change everything we thought we knew. What do you think she's been hiding all along? Drop your final predictions in the comments. The room fell completely silent. Even Maria stopped adjusting the roses in their vase. "You all think very highly of your planning abilities," the Queen continued with dry humor. "Isabella, your 25-year scheme to restore your daughter's birthright. Maria, your decision to go rogue and protect a child who wasn't yours. Edward, your 3-year search for the Santos heir. Elena, your elaborate return from the dead." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But I'm afraid you were all dancing to music I began playing long before any of you realized there was a tune." Edward straightened in his chair. "Grandmother, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," the Queen replied with evident satisfaction, "that the coffee shop where you met Diane wasn't chosen by Isabella's agents or protected by Maria's surveillance or discovered by your investigation. It was purchased by the Crown Estate in 1987 and has been under my direct management ever since." Diane felt the world tilt slightly. "You mean?" I mean that every morning for 3 years, I had reports on your routine, dear child. Your favorite study spots, your work schedule, your coffee preferences. When Edward began his search for you, I simply ensured he would look in the right places at the right times. Isabella sank into her chair, stunned. You orchestrated our meeting. I orchestrated everything, the Queen confirmed. The scholarship that paid for Diane's education, that was crown money, funneled through a charity I established in 1998. The jobs that always appeared when Maria needed them to support you both. Crown employment, every one. Even the apartment you've been living in, Diane, has been owned by the royal family for 15 years. Edward's voice was barely a whisper. How long have you known? The Queen's expression softened with genuine emotion. I've known about Diane since the day she was born. I've been waiting 26 years for the right moment to bring her home. The final twist revealed itself like the last piece of a puzzle clicking into place. You see, my dears, while everyone was so focused on bloodlines and DNA and foreign conspiracies, they missed the most important truth of all. The Queen moved to Diane and took her hands gently. Your great-grandfather, Duke Ricardo Santos, was my first love. We were engaged to be married before duty forced us to choose other paths. Diane stared at the Queen in shocked understanding. You mean? I mean that the child you carry isn't just the heir to 2 royal bloodlines, the Queen said, her voice filled with wonder. That child is the descendant of the greatest love story I never got to finish. Through you, Ricardo and I will finally have the family we were meant to share. Tears streamed down Diane's face as she understood the true scope of what had been orchestrated. Not political maneuvering or royal duty, but love, a love that had waited 7 decades to find expression through the generations. Edward rose and wrapped his arms around both women, his own eyes bright with emotion. So when you gave us your blessing, I was blessing the union that should have been mine, the Queen finished, and ensuring that my great-great-grandchild will be born into a love that spans generations. Maria approached slowly, uncertainty written across her features. Your Majesty, what about my status? I'm still technically a foreign agent. The Queen released Diane and turned to the woman who had sacrificed everything for love. Agent Volkov, you've spent 26 years serving the crown more faithfully than most of my official staff. I'm offering you a choice: return to Russia with full pardons and my gratitude, or remain here as Lady Diane's advisor with full citizenship and a royal pension. Maria's laugh was watery with tears. Where my little star goes, I go. Then welcome to the family, the Queen said simply. As the sun set over London, painting the palace walls in shades of gold and rose, Diane felt the baby move within her, a flutter of life that carried the hopes and dreams of generations. She was surrounded by the people who loved her, the mother who had raised her, the mother who had given her life, the man who had chosen her above duty, and a great-grandmother who had orchestrated it all from love. The poor girl who had been called a nobody had become the center of a royal love story that had taken 70 years to complete. And as Edward knelt beside her chair and whispered promises to their unborn child, Diane realized that sometimes the best fairy tales were the ones that took a lifetime to write. Outside, the bells of Westminster began to chime, announcing to all of London that love had triumphed over duty, that family had overcome politics, and that sometimes the most powerful throne was the one built not from conquest, but from the patient architecture of the heart. The Crown Prince had asked her to dance at that gala 6 months ago. Now she would dance with him for the rest of their lives. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If this touched your heart, then you're going to love the next one. It's just as powerful, and even more intriguing than you can imagine. So don't stop here. Check out more videos on my channel and continue the journey. I'll be waiting for you on the other side of that story. See you there.